Hey Faith Family, welcome to the Beyond Sunday podcast at Calvary Bible, where we go beyond the Sunday sermon to explore some rabbit holes and to bring some biblical truths to the surface. We hope you enjoyed today's episode.
Calvary Bible Church, welcome back. We've got another week of Beyond Sunday. Randy, you ready for this?
I'm going to say no.
I want to talk about Psalm 84.
I'm ready for that.
Okay, good. No jokes this week. I'll save my good joke for next week. Psalm 84.
I could be ill next week.
Yeah, well, so could I.
could
Who
be.
knows? Sons of Korah, got another psalmist here. You didn't give the background, and I don't blame you.
Only said one thing, that they're temple servants.
I did not hear that.
I didn't think you did. I was watching you out of the corner of my eye, and I thought, he's not even listening to me.
Yeah, I had Anna next to me.
Yes, you did.
Which is good. And this is a total side note, but just she's in first grade, and what we do with her, and we've done with other kids too, is we really try and get them to listen to you with a pencil and paper, and then draw something at the very early stages. Draw something that they hear you say.
Yeah.
So the early stages, they hear you say dog for whatever reason, and they just, I heard dog, I'm going to draw a dog. And then it develops into oh, here's an idea, that they begin to draw out and just develop that listening skill. So she just wanted to draw a cross, even though you didn't say, she was just crosses and flowers.
I've received some really good pictures from young people through the years. It's been fun to see what they're picking up on.
It is. Yeah, it really is. It's interesting. Good conversations. So Sons of Korah, temple servants.
That's about the best I did Sunday.
Yeah, okay.
Just so I just wanted to remind myself and you that these are men that are at the temple all the time.
Yeah, which is good. And their mind is on heavenly things.
Always.
Things of the Lord. So here we go. I just have one question for you about last week a little bit, actually. We had a long episode last week, so I didn't ask it. But real quick in Psalm 83, this is a psalm of Asaph.
I'll scroll up.
Okay, thank
Asaph?
you. Asaph. And if you're in America, Asaph.
Is that how you do it in America?
That's how, most of them.
All right.
So,
How they do it in
anyway, my
England.
question for you is this. How do you know who is saying what in the psalm? Or really anything. Sometimes it's hard to know who's actually saying this because you lose some of the pronouns and other things. So that one started off, "Oh God, do not keep silence." So I'm assuming that's Asaph there speaking. And then it goes to what the Lord says. Where was that? Is it in verse 4?
Which psalm are you in?
83. Oh, I'm sorry, 82.
That's
82.
right.
Yeah,
Okay.
Psalm 82.
Yeah.
Sorry, because we skipped 83.
We did.
Psalm 82.
Yeah.
Again, Asaph starts out, God has taken his place in the divine council. That's why it was a long episode, at least partially.
Yes.
In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. And then there's quotations in the ESV, how long will you judge unjustly? I would have assumed that was Asaph continuing there, but it's the way you covered it and was helpful to me. That's God speaking to the divine council. How do you know? Because it doesn't say, and God said.
You don't. But in this case, I'm working off from what follows is the judgment that he administered. So it is. I don't even know if you'd say grammatical as much as you'd say a syntactical reading between 1 and 2. I'm assuming that verse 2 is the administered judgment, the judgment that God administered at the table. And it is an assumption.
Okay.
But can I just follow up with one thing then about the reading? So one of the things that I've been studying hard for the last few years is an ancient way of reading the Psalms where it is critical to ask who's speaking, but only with a view of, or with the aim of, where is Jesus speaking these Psalms, which goes back to the issue we talked about a week ago.
Yeah.
So if you heard the last week's episode, one of the one of the folks raised the issue of, well, how can we read the Psalms as prophetic toward Christ like this? Well, one of the ways that happens in these Psalms is to try to locate the places where Christ himself is speaking these. And the argument is, this is his Bible. So that's what he read.
Yes.
But the second thing is, he's referred to as the Word. So the ancient interpreters know that Jesus is already in these Old Testament texts. So they're looking for places where he speaks. So this is only a follow-up to what you just said to me.
Yeah.
If you say to me, well, how do I know who's speaking? It is a judgment call. Context is helpful. But I think the most important thing for a Christian reader is finding the places where Jesus actually is speaking these things, because he's told us in Luke 24 that all of these things are about him.
Right.
So what we find with the ancient interpreters is they are great at looking at this psalm and saying, oh, this is Jesus speaking these words. There's a huge term for this, and it was a big deal in the ancient interpreters' world. So, and I do try to practice that in I would say in a limited sense in comparison to them. But remember, what I'm doing every Sunday for us is saying, okay, the only reason why Psalm 82 or 84, for instance, functions for the church is because our Savior has lived somehow in this psalm. Because we're in him, we also are now participating in this psalm. That's kind of the angle that we're taking every weekend.
Okay.
It's a shortened version at the end of the sermon usually, but yeah, so I don't know if that even helps you, but I did try to answer the question concerning verse 2.
It did, yeah. So the helpful part for my question was, it's a judgment call. Context is helpful, but at the end of the day, there's not the very clear markers, and God said this.
Rarely.
Right.
And then I would just add one more thing. Verse 6 does say, I said.
Yeah.
Now, if you just
So
look
who's
at that,
the I then?
Well, but look at that, and I would say that's not a soft saying that. I said, you are God, sons of the Most High, all of you. Nevertheless, like men, you shall die and fall like any prince. That's more of the indictment. So that's God now saying, this is what I referred to, this is what I called you, this is how I set you up for power and authority, but now you've failed me, you've failed to represent me. Therefore, I'm demoting you, is the way I would read that. So I would read that I said as God saying.
And then there's no quotation marks in Hebrew.
No.
Right?
No.
So the English interpreters are putting those quotation marks in there because they're super honed in on this kind of stuff. And they would then see a break in verse 8 where it says, arise, O God. So that's why they would see the verse 6, I said, quotation mark, and then the end of verse 7, quotation mark, and then verse 8, there seems to be a shift there, which is why they would put that closing quotation mark.
Yeah.
And then it's Asaph again saying, arise, O God, judge the earth, for you shall inherit all the nations.
Yeah.
Because so they're helping us to decipher who is saying what at times.
They're trying to help us.
Yeah.
That's right. And I would just say to you, if you're curious about these things, behind this, of course, is a Hebrew text, as Jonathan said, without quotation marks, but they do have accent marks. And so throughout the last 3, 4, 5 years, I've been trying to get better at deciphering the interpretive significance of some of the accent marks that the ancient Masoretes, the ones who copied this text from Hebrew to, they were copying the Hebrew to other manuscripts. I've been trying to make sense of those accent marks, which also have some interpretive clues in them. Because let's face it, these are the early readers who know this better than we do. So I am relying on them some.
Okay, that's good. So there's a 5-minute conversation about not Psalm 84, but just, and that was a question I had. Sometimes it's hard to decipher who's saying what here, and that was, I didn't want to ask it last week. But anyway, Psalm 84, to fast forward into that, there's pretty clear who seems to be saying it. It's the psalmist here.
Yeah,
okay.
yes.
So there's no quotation marks. How lovely is your dwelling place, O Lord of hosts. A quick just language question. in case anyone doesn't know, can you define hosts? Because that's not that's an English word that has changed.
Yeah, so it's the strongest, I would say it's the strongest military, it's the title with the strongest military connotation. I would often translate it Lord of the Armies or Lord of the Heavenly Armies is the way I would translate it. And if you look at your English Bible, it might have a different reading or a footnote that would say that. So,
and the reason I brought that up is because I was making notes here. It comes up at least 4 times in the psalm, and I was just thinking, yeah, when I say the word host, I think of someone who's hospitable, who opens their home and is gracious to just make you feel welcome.
Which is the opposite of this. It is. We have a hymn, and I don't know if it's a mighty fortress, but Lord Sabaoth, it's his name, is the phrase of the hymn. That's the only thing that's coming to mind is that phrase, that name.
Isn't that from a mighty fortress?
I think it is.
Yeah.
And so if you know a mighty fortress is our God, the Lord of hosts is in that psalm, is in that song, and the word Sabaoth is the way we would sing it. That is this Hebrew for the translated host. But again, Lord of the army, Lord of the heavenly army. So when you're seeing that, okay, so how many times did you say?
4.
So here's a place where if we pay attention to the titles, which we didn't do on purpose on Sunday, if you pay attention to the title, now you're getting this strong sense of I'm praying to, or in this case, I'm expressing my feelings towards being in the presence of the Lord of the heavenly armies. So just all of the imagery that conjures up for us, he is extremely powerful to defend his own. And I love being in his presence because of his power. So something along those lines would be a great way to do it.
Yeah. Well, it is to me, it feels like a curious name to bring up for a psalm like this, because we're not really ascribing much power to him other than in a place like that. We're saying, God, we long to be in your presence, your dwelling place.
Okay, but this is one of the values of having conversations like this, because you trigger things that I could have said better. So how about this, right? Actually, it's very appropriate because the next section in this psalm has to do with strength.
So 5 through.
If we're going to talk about what I would say the cohesion of Psalm 84, let's move with that title. Here's the Lord of the heavenly armies. He's got all of the forces at his disposal, unlimited strength and power. And now, if you look at verse 3, at the end of verse 3, we call him my King and my God. And then it's at verse 5 where we get the second blessed. Oh, the happinesses of those who derive their strength from him. Well, who is he? He's the Lord of the armies. So I could make an argument or not make an argument, I would say that's a good way to read this psalm.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting. The Lord of hosts is used in verses 1 and 3, and then in verse 8, and then again at the end in verse 12. But it's that center section, 5 through 7, which I think was a really neat part of the psalm, and one that I really appreciated.
It was for me.
Kind of fell in love with there. It doesn't come out there, but that's where our strength is found in him. So can we camp out on verses 5 through 8 for a minute?
I have no choice. I'm at your mercy.
Just say yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So blessed are those whose strength is in you, this commander-in-chief, Lord of heaven's armies, in whose heart are the highways to heaven. And that was another word that I found that funny because, again, when we think of highway, I'm thinking 2 to 4 lanes on the road.
Yeah.
But this is similar in that it's a path.
When I tracked this carefully, first of all, before I forget, remember that Zion is not in that Hebrew text. That's an addition. It's an interpretive addition. Okay. The NASB text, I was pointed out on Sunday, Bill Patton reads that a lot. So that's in italics to signal the reader that it's an interpretive addition. So all you have is in whose heart are the highways. Well, it was a path that was either packed down with fill or stone, or like loose stone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a man-made path. And in this case, I think the versions are correct that talked about a pilgrimage.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, and this pilgrimage for a Jewish person, they're traveling to Jerusalem for feasts throughout the year. Is there any connection to that? Like a well-trod, like, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it could be that. What you have is all of God's people are making their way to worship. And so if it's at a festival or a feast, or if it's once a year, they're going up to Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. It could be something like, it could be well-worn because of that, because of the high traffic.
But then getting into verse 6, you pointed out the Valley of
Baca.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
That's how the Americans say it too, Baca.
Is that how they say it?
They do.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wonder how the English say it, the Brits.
I don't know. I'm not even going to try.
Okay.
But you pointed out that would be a dry place, wilderness-like.
Because of the contrast with the next two lines. They're going through the valley of Baca, and remember, one of the versions, I can't remember which version, maybe the New Living Translation, actually uses weeping. And I was talking about not tears, but just a sore that weeps, just a tiny bit of liquid. And that's what's happening in this valley. But then as they go through it, they make it a place of springs, and then the early rain also covers it with pools.
Yeah.
So
I may have missed this if you said it, and I'll just blame my daughter again because that seems easy. Baca, is that an actual place or an actual valley, or is that another word?
I'm not sure. I think it is. I think it is a place, and I didn't memorize how many versions actually use it that way.
And where's the weeping come from?
It's the same. It's the verb form is to
Baca.
weep.
Oh,
and so the New Living Translation picked up on it and said that's the valley of weeping, going off from the verb.
I did hear you talking about the weeping, but I missed that it's the verb form of Baca. Okay.
What I thought was great about this, though, is I think your wife, Rebecca, was right off to my left, and I was trying to say, I think that's exactly what Rebecca and Lauren did for the ladies on that a few days ago
Saturday.
at the women's retreat. These two ladies in our faith family I think they were talking about how these dry places or the hurtful places in their lives ended up being something that God was using for good. And so the language here was so good. They make it a place of, the blessing of God is on them so much that even these difficult times, they become a time of flourishing and growth.
Yeah, absolutely. From strength to strength. And so help me with that phrase again. You touched on it, but it's an important phrase.
So, it is. And again, you don't have, the imagery is kind of bizarre for us. So to go from strength to strength implies that there's no weakness. And I think I tried to say on Sunday, what you're seeing here is you're seeing a description of a mature believer who is going through life, even going through the valley that's dry at times. You go through those valleys, and we talk like that. We're going through a valley. This is a difficult time. They go through that, but every step they take is one of strength because they've already been, we've already seen the blessing in verse 5, blessed are those whose strength is in you, or as the New Living Translation, whose strength comes from you, from God. So here's a person who takes steps through life, and they're strong at each step. That's what the blessing of God does. So remember, if you're trying to put Psalm 84 into practice, this is an important one that will help you with reading a lot of the other Psalms. First of all, remember this opens up with an expressive. This is a term that I use to show how is the author signaling worship to the reader. And in this case, to say how lovely is your dwelling place, or the courts of the Lord. And what was that song that we sang from verse 10, right? For a day in your courts is better than 1,000 elsewhere. When the psalmist expresses that type of emotion, that's designed to elicit the same emotion in us. So the first thing is to say, do we feel this emotion for heading into worship? And I tried so hard to get us all to be honest with ourselves and say, this is a target for us. This is probably not something that we all experience very often, not to this measure. But now to your point, if the psalmist says, I want you to feel what I feel about coming into the presence of God in corporate worship, now what we do is with these blessed scenarios is we say, this is describing me. So for instance, back to they go from strength to strength in verse 7. That's a great time for me to assess the degree to which I feel strong in my dry seasons or my weak moments or my whatever. How do I fit this description? They go from strength to strength is the psalmist's way to describe all of the people that are on the way going to worship because they can't wait to get there. So they have all the anticipation of being in the presence of God. They have all the excitement of that. They have all the hope in that. And they're going from strength to strength. And line B, each one appears before God. So I forget which commentator helper I had, but one of them said, isn't this great that there's no weakening toward the end of the pilgrimage? Like, I can see the structure, but I'm not there yet. And these last steps, my legs are so heavy. It's not that at all. It's actually, it's a triumphant, here we are, we've made it, and they all make it. And so, as I tried to say on Sunday, we have to read Psalm 84 and ask ourselves, does it describe me? Am I this type of worshiper? And I have to be honest as well and say, today is one of those days where I've had some strength and weakness in it.
Yeah.
But this is the target. This is the goal, moving from strength to strength. Every step in the journey involving experiencing God's strength for me. So it's a good way to try to put a psalm into practice.
Yeah, my mind's going to being reminded that the dwelling place, this isn't talking about Jesus' home, like not the architecture. That's not why we love it. It's God's presence.
Right.
Is it Psalm 16:11? In your presence is
fullness of joy.
Yeah, and pleasure forevermore. So in His presence.
Yeah, and some of my scholar friends would say, this can happen everywhere because God is everywhere.
Yeah.
What's important though, I don't mind that angle as long as you start with the primary angle of there's something special that takes place where God's localized corporate presence is found.
Okay.
There's something special with that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they never would have done this. God never would have said, meet together in the Old Testament or the New. So I don't mind the angle of, God is everywhere, so you love to be in His presence in your own devotional life. That's good. Yes, that's really good. But this is different here. This is a very corporate, just by virtue of the fact that it's in the Psalter, this is designed to be sung by the people of God when they gather for worship.
Right. Besides that, the fact that it's in the Psalter, what makes you, what triggers the corporate side of this?
Just the pilgrimage. They're on the way. People going up to gather with God's people. This isn't an individual pilgrimage. This is more than likely. This is all of them because of the each one appears before God in Zion. They're all going there. This would be anything associated with the worship of God in the tabernacle, in the temple, something like that.
Gotcha.
There's nothing actually in the Psalter for someone doing this, like taking a walk outside and communing with God on the lawn. It's not that it's wrong. No. It's just nothing in the Psalter about that.
Yeah, right. Okay, I'm tracking with you. And then just to close out, verse 11, no good thing does He withhold from those who walk uprightly. And I just want to underline, I appreciate what you said there about that. If we're looking at our lives and feeling like good things are being withheld from us, two angles. One, it's not good right now, or two, I'm not walking uprightly. And I just, because when you read that, sometimes your mind can go to the prosperity gospel where God's going to give you good things and it's going to be a smooth, easy, path for you of God's blessing. And sometimes it's the valley of Baca. And we experience the dryness, the wilderness, the testing, the trials. And so it might just be not yet.
Right.
Not right now.
Right.
Or there might be something about our own walk.
Mm-hmm.
And I just appreciated that as a way to take this part of this psalm into my week.
And again, if you're thinking about, well, I want Psalm 84 to guide my week, remember that verse 11, when you read, no good thing does he withhold from those who walk uprightly. That's the psalmist asserting a stated reality that we're supposed to believe as well and say that is really true. No good thing. He doesn't withhold any good thing from us. Yeah. But we have to believe it.
Yeah.
That is true. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm out of stuff here.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay.
Calvary Bible Church. Thanks for joining us, bearing with us. The Bible says bear with one another. So thank you for bearing with us, for putting up with us.
Yes.
And you can email your questions into podcast@cbcmj.com. We love to interact with them week in and week out. I'm thinking I've got a special episode in my mind. We'll talk about that. Memorial Day weekend, I'm going to be away over the weekend, so might have to do a bonus one for that one. Anyway, just whetting the appetite. There you go. All right, we'll see you guys on Sunday. Thank you. Love you guys. See ya.
Thanks again for joining us on today's episode. And remember, our Sunday sermons are meant to lead us to a life of worship beyond Sunday.